Chapter 8, from 1803 to 1824, Section 6. The Australian colonies owe their pastoral wealth originally to Captain John MacArthur of the 102nd Regiment. He was assisted by the enterprise of Captain Waterhouse of the Royal Navy, who, though a sailor and confessedly ignorant of pastoral affairs, conveyed to the colony the stock which laid the foundation of its fortunes. The sheep brought by the First Fleet to New South Wales were sacrificed to the necessities of the time. The cattle strayed and were discovered long after grazing on the Nepean increased to many hundreds. Several efforts were made by the New South Wales Corps to introduce a stock, chiefly for the knife. But the transmission was attended with considerable difficulty, and the greater portion died. The basis of the New South Wales flocks was the Bengal. These, bearing hair, were mixed with sheep originally from Holland and imported from the Cape. Mr. MacArthur, having obtained some sheep from Ireland, remarked the great, though accidental, improvement in the fleece, which exhibited a mixture of wool, and gave the first hint of a great possible improvement. He then requested Captain Kent to procure sheep from the merino flocks of Colonel Gordon at the Cape. These were forwarded by Captain Waterhouse in 1797, who delivered to MacArthur 3 rams and 5 ewes, and retained a proportion himself. The results surpassed expectation. The flocks of Bengal yielded to 3 or 4 crossings and produced the finest wool. Thus, the heaviest fleece in 1801 was 3½ pounds, and in the next season it improved to 5 pounds. The ewe produced wool worth 9pence, and her lamb's wool was valued at 3s. Even the merino improved by the exchange of climate. Its wool produced at the Cape being worth 4 shillings 6pence, and at New South Wales 6 shillings. The rate of increase was not less encouraging. The produce of 50 ewes in 7 years was 2,000. In 1803, Captain MacArthur visited England and presented a memorial to the Lords of the Committee of the Privy Council on the pastoral capabilities of New South Wales. He requested the Crown to grant the use of public lands and servants, and offered to supply the commissariat at a given price, and to sustain the entire risk or loss of his experiment. The statement of increase was doubted. The testimony respecting the quality of wool could not be disputed, as MacArthur had procured the certificates of eminent manufacturers. It was, however, asserted that the natural pasture would be unable to subsist flocks, and it was necessary to combat this objection. MacArthur proposed to sell his flock at their value to a company, and on credit, on condition that the company procured a grant from the Crown for pasture. This was declined, but Lord Camden was requested by their lordships to encourage MacArthur, and he received in consequence permission to occupy the cow pastures, where natural fences prevented the intermixture of his flocks. A grant of 5,000 acres and ultimately of an additional 5,000 was made to him. Never was a reward more justly due or given with less sacrifice. Mr. MacArthur procured from the royal flock at Kew 1 ewe and 9 rams. With these he raised his flock to 6,000 in 1808 and frequently sold pure merino rams at from £14 to £28 per head. The merino stock of George III, from which the Australian stocks were partly drawn, was sent to that monarch by the Spanish Cortes. The king's love of rural pleasures was thus instrumental in adding immense wealth to his empire. It was not until 1820 that settlers of Van Diemen's Land entered the career of improvement. The original stock were introduced by Colonel Patterson, a mixture of Teeswater, Leicester and Bengal breeds. The Lieutenant Governor was anxious to improve the quality by an importation of merino lambs. By an engagement with MacArthur, 300 were shipped at Sydney, but more than 1/3 died. The rest were distributed to the settlers by lot, who gave the engagements to repay at the stipulated sum, and who received facilities for the experiment in suitable tickets of occupation. MacArthur received, at 7 shillings 6pence per acre, 4,368 acres of land for the 300 lambs, valued to the Crown at £5 per head. From this date the wool of the Tasmanian flocks became known to commerce. Van Diemen's Land wool was not an article of export until 1819. Only £71,000 had been sent to London from New South Wales, but some had realised even 7 shillings 6pence per pound. In one instance 10 shillings, it is said, by a friendly competition, a sum 3 times greater than the English price of the finest continental wool. a specimen had been manufactured for George IV, and which so pleased him that he directed Sir J. Bloomfield to inquire if more could be obtained in England. There seemed now no hesitation in giving credit to MacArthur's prediction that the boundless pastures of New South Wales would relieve the manufacturers of dependence on Spain. That great encouragement had not been afforded, and greater progress accomplished may be considered surprising. The wool of commerce was still inconsiderable, although the flocks of both colonies amounted to 200,000. Before the merino was first introduced, the fleece was considered worthless. The operation of shearing was often delayed until the sheep were injured. It was a deduction from the profit. The wool was burned or thrown into the stockyards as manure. In 1819, the captain of the Regalia accepted a proportion of Van Diemen's land wool in exchange for merchandise. It had no market price, its expenses were considerable, and a duty of 3d. Was levied at London. A sample was seen by Mr. Hopkins, lying in the docks in the worst possible condition. The speculation was a failure. The colonial government bought several tons a few months after at 3d. Per pound for mattresses, a sum that scarcely paid for its conveyance from the interior. The duty, formerly 3d., was reduced, on the recommendation of the Commissioner, to 1 penny per pound. To Mr. Henry Hopkins, the public are indebted for the first appreciation of Tasmanian wool. In September 1821, he offered by advertisement a price in money and bought at 4d. Per pound. 12 bales sold in London, the entire wool export of the colony, for 7d. Per pound, or £88. The expenses were nearly half that sum. The merchants, however, continued to purchase, and the settlers to improve their flocks. In 1823, 550 bales were exported in the Deveron, and an equal quantity in other vessels, and the wool of Clarendon rivaled the flocks at Port Jackson. End of Chapter 8 being Chapter 2, from 1803 to 1824, Section 6.